Follow along, Catholic Pilgrims, as we follow French doctor of the Church, St. Francis de Sales, through his book, Introduction to the Devout Life. Tune in as we read through this practical guide for living out the Catholic faith well. Hello, Catholic Pilgrims. Welcome back for another reading from Introduction to the Devout Life. Today we are reading chapter 3 of the first part. I think you're really going to like this chapter. Its message needs to be heard for sure. So wasting no time, let's grab our books and begin. Chapter 3, Devotion Suitable to All Kinds of Vocations and Professions. In the creation, God commanded the plants of the earth to bring forth fruit, each after its kind. And in a similar way, he commands Christians, who are the living plants of his church, to bring forth the fruits of devotion, each according to his calling and vocation. There is a different practice of devotion for the gentleman and the mechanic, for the prince and the servant, for the wife, the maiden, and the widow. And still further, the practice of devotion must be adapted to the capabilities, the engagements, and the duties of each individual. It would not do were the bishop to adopt a Carthusian solitude, or if the father of a family refused, like the Capuchins, to save money. If the artisan spent his whole time in church, like the professed religious, or the latter were to expose himself to all manner of society in his neighbor's behalf, as the bishop must do, such devotion would be inconsistent and ridiculous. Yet this kind of mistake is not unfrequently made, and the world being either not able or not willing to distinguish between true devotion and the indiscretion of false devotees, condemns that devotion which nevertheless has no share in these inconsistencies. No, my Philothea, true devotion hinders no one, but rather it perfects everything. And whenever it is out of keeping with any person's legitimate vocation, it must be spurious. Aristotle says that the bee extracts honey from the flowers without injuring them, leaving them as fresh and whole as she finds them. But true devotion does still better, for it not only hinders no duty or vocation, but on the contrary, it adorns and purifies them. Throw precious stones into honey, and the natural color of each will wax more brilliant. And so every individual adorns his vocation by following it with devotion. Domestic peace is assured, conjugal love strengthened, fidelity to our sovereign more closely treasured, and all occupations rendered more acceptable and agreeable. It is not merely an error, but a heresy, to suppose that a devout life is necessarily banished from the soldier's camp, the merchant's shop, the prince's court, or the domestic hearth. Doubtless that form of devotion which is purely contemplative, monastic, and religion will not accord with their vocations, but there are other forms of devotion suitable to perfect a secular life. This we may learn from the example of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Job, Tobias, Sarah, Rebecca, and Judith in the Old Dispensation, and in the New from St. Joseph, Lydia, St. Crispin in their trades, from St. Anne, St. Martha, St. Monica, Aquila and Priscilla in their households, Cornelius, St. Sebastian, and St. Maurice in their military charges, and from Constantine, St. Helena, St. Louis, and St. Edward on their thrones. Some even have prospered better amidst the multitude, which seems so ill-suited for holiness, than in solitude, which appears its most likely soil. Thus St. Gregory remarks that Lot remained chaste whilst in Sodom, and fell into sin after he had forsaken it. Wheresoever we may be, we may and should aim at a life of perfect devotion. Thank you, St. Francis, for this chapter. I'm going to echo St. Francis and say, there is no one-size-fits-all type of true devotion. We can't all live like cloistered nuns or monks that live in a monastery. Likewise, Not all of us are meant to be out in the secular world. And we need to appreciate that different vocations will live out true devotion in different ways. I was talking with my mom one morning over coffee, and we were joking about how sometimes we are scared to fully surrender to God because of what He might ask of us. And I laughed and I said, I have this fear that God will say, leave your husband and kids behind and go be a missionary in some far off land. But it's an irrational fear. God would never ask me to abandon my family. I'm a mother and a wife, and so God is never going to ask me to neglect my vocation. Now, there may come a day when my kids are out of the house that God calls me and my husband to missionary work in a far-off land. I don't know. And it's not as if I can't serve my community with my children as kind of a local missionary, helping at church, pregnancy resource centers, etc. I love how St. Francis says, quote, "It would not do were a bishop to adopt a Carthusian solitude, or if a father of a family refused, like the Capuchins, to save money. If the artisan spent his whole time in church like the professed religious, or the latter were to expose himself to all manner of society in his neighbor's behalf as the bishop must do. Such devotion would be inconsistent and ridiculous," unquote. I have to laugh that he uses the word ridiculous because it's so true and so real how he says it. We need bishops to be out serving their flock. We need fathers to save money and not require their families to support themselves based on begging for what they need. Yet at the same time, we need those that are in solitude and contemplative prayer, and we need those that trust in the charity of others and live very simple lives as Christ did. We need to foster true devotion in the best way in keeping with harmony in our vocation. And it might change as we get older. My spiritual life as a mother with older children looks much different than when I had little kids underfoot. Remember, the saints' lives of true devotion were and are all serving a very important function of the body of Christ. Let's not pin ourselves or anyone else into cookie-cutter styles of true devotion. We'll stop here today, Catholic pilgrims. Spend some time looking at the third paragraph, at all the names that we know so well, and thank God that we have all the ways that God blesses the world with true devotion from others. I'll see you back here soon, and until then, live the faith boldly and travel well.